It's Been So Long in Adrienette Fanfiction, Part 24. Miss Rossi, Gabriel Agreste was a stoic man. His rigid posture and curt tones made sure that was known. One would have to be a fool to not register the air of superiority he exhumed. Mr. Agreste, Lila said politely. All traces of that overly excited, ego-inflating, pleasing girl she had been before was long gone. I have noticed that one of the students in Adrien's class is encouraging him to be less than polite. And I worry that is only the tip of the iceberg of what could happen if he isn't taken away from her presence, Lila explained. Mr. Agreste remained stone cold. She quite honestly expected more from him. Perhaps even the slightest bit of concern for his son, of all people. And who may it be? He asked. Marinette Dupin Chang. He raised an eyebrow. Well, at least there was a reaction. Really? The fashion designer sounded shocked, unconvinced even. Lila nodded earnestly and plastered a sad expression on her face. Yes. Mr. Agreste looked her over carefully, clearly trying to decide whether or not she was being serious. That was the cue for upping the show. I know Marinette is a nice girl. I mean, I've heard it, but she isn't particularly kind to me. The brunette attached another sad expression. As if she wanted Marinette's approval. It literally didn't matter or even compare to practically everyone else's. But, I worry that's the problem. I know that Marinette and Adrien are closer, and I think she's trying to make Adrien dislike me too. I spoke to him, and he only gave impolite, gruff answers that she clearly encouraged. He looked quite sad, so I really do think that she's making him act like that. Lila tried to gauge Mr. Agreste's reaction. However, the man had a wicked poker face. Idly, Lila wondered if she should ask for lessons. There were no signs of whether or not he believed her. And why does she dislike you so much? Mr. Agreste asked. His facial expressions and body language may have been hiding his thoughts, but clearly his carefully chosen words told all. He didn't believe her. Lila gritted her teeth. Another Marinette. Only this time, it was a powerful adult who could hold their tongue rather than a childish girl who screamed wolf at every turn. Marinette attempting to call her out. Very entertaining as she destroyed the rest of her life in the process. Gabriel Agreste seeing through all the smoke and mirrors? Well, that could be the downfall of her entire reputation. Well, I really don't know. No, she did know. But I think it's because I was such good friends with Adrien and everyone else when I first came. And at that time, they weren't that close, and her friends said that she was jealous. So I understood why she didn't like me, but now, I just don't get it. And I don't get why she's trying to make Adrien not like me now. It's pretty petty, to be honest. Mr. Agreste nodded. And why do you think Miss Dupin Chang would want to do that? Oh my god, he really didn't believe her. Lila wanted to scream. He was poking and prodding at her every word. At least with Marinette, she never thought long enough to actually question her. The girl just began to scream her head off, sounding like a mental facility patient that had just escaped. For say, if she had the brains, Marinette could also break down every story she had. She didn't, however, thank God, but Mr. Agreste wasn't as easily dealt with, and Lila knew what was happening around her, unlike some people. She knew how to play around with Marinette and the adults at school, but she also knew that Gabriel Agreste was no fool. Well, she explodes at me a lot and clearly says that she doesn't want me around. And her friend says she never acts like that. It's only to me. And for no reason? Not that I know of. Lila was no fool either. She wasn't gonna shoot herself in the foot and add in the fact that she'd sometimes baited the girl. She left those mini truths for people who believed her almost completely. Everyone knew if you mixed in a slight and unflattering truth, the world would hang on to your every word, or at the very least, it was one of the few things that her father taught her. Gabriel was silent for a couple more moments before breathing in deeply and sighing. "Very well. I would like to request that you shadow him," he said curtly. Lila almost stumbled back. He was asking her to what? Shadow him? She questioned. Her voice nearly gave it all away by going up too high. Mr. Agreste nodded stiffly. "Yes, I would like you to keep an eye on him and report back to me. I worry about him at times," he admitted, although rather unemotionally. "I won't let you down, sir," Lila said, trying to keep the wide smile off her face. But for once, the calm, cool facade was way too hard to maintain. Mr. Agreste eyed her once more before retreating it back into his office, leaving Lila at the bottom of the staircase. Lila took her new job in stride. Walking into school, her eyes scanned for the mop of blonde hair but didn't find it. Maybe he hadn't come yet. She scanned over everyone again. Where was he? "Oh my God, Lila." "Shut up!" She chastised herself. God, she was acting so crazy, like Chloe the Brat or even Marinette. Ugh, cue retching noises. Lila took a deep breath. It was time to calm down and be normal. She walked over to some of the girls that cooed over her and entertained them for about 10 minutes. "He is so cute," one of the nameless girls cried when Lila brought up a K-pop star that she had met. "And super nice," Lila said enthusiastically. It only took a couple more minutes, but eventually a black car arrived and outstepped the blonde that she was looking for. Her eyes flickered towards him and excused herself to the group of squealing girls who wished her goodbye. Lila coolly made her way over to Adrien, but not too close that him or Marinette would notice. Speaking of the annoying girl, Marinette was animatedly talking to him about something. She only caught little snippets of the conversation. Something about runway, texting, and Adrien, but said really weirdly, and a model. Weird conversation, but whatever. Adrien nodded enthusiastically, making the flame of jealousy in Lila's chest flare. Her hands formed tight balls gripping the straps of her bag. "Breathe. You've been being crazy," she told herself. Truth be told, Lila never cared much for Adrien. She didn't know how much she cared about him now, either until now. At first, getting the blonde was rather a game of reputations, with the added benefits of ticking off Marinette. However, the more time she spent with him, the more she thought about him even, the more the brunette realized that Adrien was an enjoyable person to be around. He was a little shy and awkward, but a very kind and darn good listener. He wasn't annoying, or at least not to the degree of the girls that she was forced to surround herself with. Adrien always listened to her and seemed to genuinely care about her. However, it did seem that he was possibly slightly angry at her. His green eyes hardly spared her a glance, and when they did, they weren't as warm as they were before. Admittedly, it made her sad. He was supposed to be a fluffy little angel, not a person who holds grudges like Marinette. Lila snuck another glance at them. This time, Adrien almost sensed her gaze and nearly caught her watching. The blonde inhaled deeply. "It's fine. It's fine. It's all fine," she muttered to herself. She and Adrien would make it soon. It would all work out. Lila smiled pleasantly and nodded at some 3 or 4 chattering girls in front of her. Of course, they were blabbering about boys. Ugh, how shallow. Does anyone pass the Bechdel test nowadays? At this point, it was all, "I want a boyfriend. Ooh, this guy is so cute. I would totally date him," and all that prissy stuff. Then again, perhaps she was being a hypocrite. A good portion of her life, as of now, was leading to her dating Adrien. And for that matter, she wasn't even in love with him. It seemed everyone else was. It was ridiculous, though. Most people had never even spoken to him in real life, and if they had, it was for a brief second or two. Lila wasn't delusional enough to act like that. In what world would she claim to be endlessly in love with Adrien, no matter how kind and wonderful he could be? Yes, he'd be a nice one to date, but that was practically the extent of it. No, none of that, and cue Marinette, the houses and hamsters thing. Not an ounce of the, "we're gonna get married and live forever and ever together." That was literally crazy talk. Literally, what high school relationship actually lasted? Much less one where one was literally a model. People were ridiculous. Quietly and by herself for once, Lila walked into the classroom. Class was boring as usual. She didn't expect it to be interesting, for to say, but that was a good thing. She could monitor Adrien and Marinette now that they weren't actually doing anything. The teacher was giving a lecture. Marinette and Adrien were quietly listening, surprisingly not turning around to chat or text via phone. Despite that, Lila typed into her notes app that Marinette tapped Adrien on the shoulder. Gabriel would not be happy to hear that, and thus would ensure Marinette would have to stay far, far, far away from Adrien. Just as Lila wanted. And for the rest of class, Lila kept a watchful eye, though there were a few times where she had to look away, directing her attention to the teacher up front. Clearly, Marinette and Adrien both got the feeling that someone was monitoring them and turned around suspiciously. A lot. The first half of the day went as normal, dragging on slowly as can be with grueling work in each class. God, there was a reason Lila neglected to do her homework during the missions. She knew she was brilliant, she knew her way around people, but geometry? Not so much. How in the world did any of these random shapes and, God forbid, letters make any sense? She didn't share any more classes with Adrien or Marinette. Whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, she had no idea. For one, she didn't really even get a chance to talk to Adrien and get herself back in his good graces again. And 2, she didn't have anything else to put in her notes to report back to his father. Whatever, she could probably come up with something. "Lila, a voice called from behind her. Only it wasn't an annoying, high-pitched, shrill voice. It was lower, and she knew exactly who it was. Plastering on a pleasant but not overly excited smile, she turned around. "Yeah, Adrien?" she said brightly. The blonde looked as if he was feeling awkward, grasping at the strap of his backpack, trying not to be in the way of the herds of students walking down the hall. Lila slipped back into the classroom and motioned for Adrien to follow. He walked slowly and clearly kept his distance. "What is it?" Lila asked. Adrien took in a breath. "Are you following me?" he asked. Lila almost stepped back. She didn't think he'd so bluntly confront her. "I mean, I'm not trying to accuse you or anything, but it really feels like you're watching me and happen all day," he continued, looking nervous. By the look in his eyes, though, he was accusing her. Just in a nice Adrien way. Lila was about to open her mouth and defend herself, but Adrien just kept on talking. "I don't know. I could be paranoid, but please, just stop." His green eyes pleaded for her not to keep watch. She knew she should say, "Of course I will stop," or something like that, but of course that wouldn't happen. "Adrien, I'm not following you around," Lila said innocently. Adrien sighed tiredly. He didn't believe her. Great! Neither aggress was truly on her side. "Please stop. Stop lying for your cover and following me around. It's really weird," Adrien said bluntly. That certainly shocked Lila. She didn't even have the brain function to defend herself. Instead, she stood frozen in place, watching him exit the room and joining Marinette down the hall. The black-haired girl glared harshly at her, feeling the blaze of anger and annoyance Lila already had towards the girl actually grow in size. With her mouth in a tight line and barely inaudible scoff, Lila added more to her notes. "Makes him rude," she wrote. His father would not be happy to hear this news. For the record, Lila was never one to stray from what needed to be done, and as much as she was going to respect Adrien's wishes, Gabriel had asked her to keep watch, and an adult took priority. Especially one that, God forbid, skeptically looked at her. She needed Gabriel to be on her side. "Hey, you can come eat with us." Lila almost fell over from the sheer shock of Alya grabbing her arm. "Sure," Lila said, regaining her composure and tone of voice. The brunette practically dragged her over to a lunch table. "So, how long are you going to be staying this time?" Alya asked her. Lila thought about that for a moment. Okay, there was no way she was staying for any longer. No, sitting at home, being bored out of her mind, was thousands of times better than interacting with the students at this school. I think I have to leave in a couple of days or something. I so wish I could stay longer," Lila said, faking a sad expression. Alya chimed about how she wished that too. "That's too bad. You'll narrowly miss my dude's birthday," Nino said, pointing to Adrien, who was in the midst of a hushed conversation with Marinette. Ugh, that scene was really bothering her. "Wait, really? That's so sad. I really wish I could come and celebrate your birthday with you," Lila said, looking at the green-eyed boy. He gave her an uneasy smile. Thanks, but I don't think Father will let me do anything anyways," Adrien said, directing his gaze away. Lila almost frowned, stating that she could probably get his father to change his mind. But, you know, that would be a pretty alarming sentence, and thus Lila kept quiet. Oh, that's too bad, she sighed instead. Out of her peripheral, she noticed Marinette's harsh glare on her. Unfortunately, the girl kept quiet, providing no verbal ammo. What would you do if you were, for say, to have a party? Lila asked earnestly. Adrien's eyes seemed to go everywhere at once. Everywhere, except on her at least. Probably just have some friends over, he said plainly, with no sign of continuing his idea. And as annoyed as she was that Adrien wasn't elaborating, he was a rather low-key person who went with everything. She knew that. It would actually be very good in their future relationship. It wouldn't really be good if they were constantly disagreeing. Lila had a plan, and Adrien going against most of it would certainly be a damper. Ooh, sounds like so much fun! Lila tried once more to get Adrien to brightly talk to her, but instead he silently nodded. Don't worry about it too much. Even if it was happening, you're not going to be there, Marinette cut in. Her voice was perhaps as honeyed as Lila's own. Olive green eyes matched the bright blue as they harshly stared at each other, almost daring a word out of the other. Mari, it's not Elle's fault that her trips are always so often. She's doing some real good around the world, Alya scolded the girl in front of her. Lila nearly allowed the smug smile to appear on her face, but held it in, only barely. But the annoyance of being called that ridiculous nickname was still present. Seriously, the name Lila didn't need to be shortened, yet Alya never got the freaking hint. Marinette scoffed. Sure, she can't decide them, can she? The girl said with biting sarcasm. She can't, Alya continued to defend Lila. Marinette crossed her arms and rolled her eyes. Sadly, she didn't say another word. Only another irate look her way was shot towards the Italian, but nothing else. Adrien whispered something in her ear and she nodded to it. We'll catch up with you guys later, the blonde said. Standing up, Alya waved them goodbye and the duo disappeared into the building. Alya huffed and turned towards Lila, who, for the record, was fuming. I don't get it. I never get it. I have no clue as to why Mari acts like that to you. It makes no sense. You two would get along great. Are you two too similar or something? Like, you're both so kind and talented. Do you guys clash? I just don't get it, Alya ranted. Lila nodded almost solemnly. I don't know either, Lila faked sadness. I know she's a nice girl. I've just yet to figure out why she hates me so much. Alya agreed. It wasn't long before Lila excused herself to go talk to the teachers, aka take time to think about her next move. The brown-haired girl made her way through the halls, silently as she possibly could. Her footsteps were light as feathers, barely touching the ground. I swear to God, I'm gonna end up punching her one of these days, a voice basically shrieked from an empty classroom. And said voice clearly belonged to Dupanche. Lila made her way around Marinette, for wherever that girl was, Adrien was around too. I know. You need to breathe though. Alya still thinks you're being irrational, Adrien's soothing voice said, albeit quieter. Lila smirked to herself. Well, to everyone else, Marinette was being crazy and irrational. Who screams, she's a liar, she's a liar, she's a liar at all times without actually giving any reasons to? She just sounded crazy. Even if Lila was an idiot idiot herself, she'd believe the black-haired girl was off her rocker too. That stuff was just not normal, like calling wolf like there was none. Maybe I am, but why the heck is everyone so blind in the school? I don't know. People just really need to open their eyes. It literally took me a week and lots of coffee to fight off the jet lag, and here Lila runs in, perfectly timed with this time. Right. You fell asleep the first week of school and Miss Bustier called you out on it. Don't remind me. That was not a good way to wake up. It was funny. Still bad. By then, Lila had made her way to the door and barely in the view of the rectangle mirror. Marinette was pacing around the room as Adrien patiently sat in his seat, professional as can be. Lila smiled fondly. If they were ever to do a couples interview in the future, he'd be so good at being the sweet, I clearly love her more type boyfriend. Lila would be the talker in the relationship. He'd know that too. It was funny. As much as he was a confident model, Adrien Negresse was shy and awkward. A perfect balance to Lila Rossi herself. An outgoing and perfectly suited girl for all situations. Ring! The shock of the bell caused Lila to jump up. Adrien and Marinette both whipped their heads to the clocks, which was unfortunately close by the door. Lila prayed they didn't notice her hair. She raced to her next class. God, as much as her job was to monitor them, she didn't actually want to give off stalker vibes. Almost panting, Lila made her way to class and breathed deeply, trying to get her heart rate down to normal level. Luckily, Adrien or Marinette were in that class, so she didn't need to come up with an exact reason as to why she was behind that door. Then again, she could just say she was dropping off some stuff and was shocked by the bell, which, well, was what happened. Or at least, kinda. Lila's attention was taken away from her mind space and drawn back to the teacher when they clapped loudly twice. Lila wrinkled her nose. As strict and as annoyingly naggy as this teacher was, she was also a huge sap and one of the easiest fools in the school to convince into homework free passes. Their voice began to drone on and on about atoms and subatomic particles and other things that Lila didn't particularly care for. She sighed and rested her head on her hands. The next couple of hours would be long. Lila was about 101% sure that her head was about to explode. Note to self, never do 2 days of school in a row again, Lila muttered to herself. Thank God she was done and would be for a very long time. Lila prayed to whatever was up above that none of the squeaking girls would try and corner her. Lila's poor ears would not be able to handle that kind of torture right now. Hey! Okay, so not exactly a high-pitched baby voice, but an annoying one at the very least. Bless her luck. Lila let out almost an inaudible groan and turned around to face a stone-faced Marinette. Oh, Marinette! What do you want? Lila said sweetly, though the bite in her voice was not missed by the other girl. Why were you following me and Adrien around today? Marinette said shortly. Lila raised her brows in mock shock. What? She said dramatically, a wicked smile gracing her lips as Marinette fumed. You know exactly what I'm talking about, the black-haired girl seethed. Lila pursed her lips together. I really don't. Would you be a dear and please tell me? Lila said, reveling in a cruel tone that she was throwing Marinette's way. God, this game was so easy to play. Marinette had no control. You have been, following Adrien around like a creepy stalker all day. Even after he asked you to stop. We saw you standing outside that door. That's literally so weird. Why the heck were you watching us? Marinette spit out. On the inside, Lila winced over the fact that she had actually been caught. On the outside, she remained calm and collected. She tilted her head to the right and ghosted her hand right in front of Marinette's face. Following, stalker. Such dramatic words. I was just completing a job. Can't blame a girl for being diligent, can you? Lila said in almost a sing-song voice. She clicked her tongue thrice. Besides, don't act like you haven't done your own fair share of tiptoeing around. Lila grinned as Marinette went pink. Her mouth opened, probably to defend herself, but nothing came out. That's different, Marinette finally managed out. Lila gave a breathless laugh and tossed her hair behind her shoulders. Linking her hands behind her back, she leaned forward and gave Marinette a Cheshire Cat's grin, wide and dangerous. Marinette stuttered out a "Is it though?" Lila said. Marinette stuttered out a yes, but the both of them knew that wasn't true. Lila pulled herself back straight and smirked at Marinette. The girl looked like she was about to turn color. Whatever. It's not about that. You're stalking him now. Stop it. Marinette picked herself up and accused her once more. Lila tiredly sighed. I have no idea what you're talking about, Lila said. Out of the corner of her eye, Lila noticed a herd of students exiting the school. She had to turn it up a notch if she was going to get Marinette to explode. I've barely even seen him all day, thanks to you. She hissed out the last part. That did it. The fury in Marinette's eyes multiplied. You dirty liar! She shrieked, attracting the attention of people around them. Lila looked around, gauging reactions. She tilted her head and pretended to look disappointed. I have been nothing but truthful, Lila said, placing a hand over her heart, pretending to look deeply hurt. No, you haven't! Marinette pointed at her. You're always lying. I don't even get it. Why the heck do you feel the need to be such a pathological liar? Every second of the day, nothing even remotely truthful comes out of your mouth. Marinette began to raise in volume, drawing the alarm of people around them. Lila lightly patted Marinette. It was a gesture of patronizing. But others would surely take it as comfort. Now, Lila spoke as if she was calming down a 3-year-old child from a tantrum, which, to be fair, was a similar situation. You're making a scene. Take a breath, drink some water. It's all okay. Lila continued her charade. Marinette pushed Lila's hand off her shoulder forcefully. Stop acting like that! Marinette snapped at her. Like what? Lila said innocently. Like you're the most self-righteous person ever. Oh my god, you're the least ethical person in this school, lying all the time about humanitarian trips. You're not helping anyone but yourself, and we both know that, Marinette shouted. By now, many of their peers had gathered, and oh, were they mad. What are you talking about? Lila is the sweetest person ever. Oh my god. Chill, girl. Just because Lila does more than you doesn't mean she's faking it all. Mari, Lila never lies. She's super selfless. What do you have against her? Alya, of course, came to her defense. Lila smiled happily at the curly-haired girl. Marinette almost snarled. Why don't you guys see it? She called around. Her stories are so far-fetched. The crowd looked back at her. We live in Paris. Her doing good is more believable than most of the things that happen here, someone called from the back. Marinette cried out in annoyance. Ugh! She threw up her hands. Lila clicked her tongue, and although the noise was covered by Marinette's little rampage, the brunette placed her hands on Marinette's shoulders, making the girl freeze momentarily, and that gave Lila the time she needed to wrap her arms around the girl's back in a hug that seemed to be friendly, but in reality, Lila squeezed as tight as she possibly could, cutting off some of Marinette's airway. It's okay. If you want, I can take you on a trip if you feel left out, Lila offered. The crowd took it as kind. Again, Marinette shoved her back. Don't touch me, she snapped. Alya jumped in at that moment. Marinette, she was being nice to you. Why do you have to act like this? Alya scolded her. Marinette threw an angry look at her best friend. Can't you tell she's lying? She cried. Alya linked arms with Lila and looked at the black-haired girl with sheer determination. If she was, yes, Alya said shortly. There was a silent stare down between the girls that Lila was biting back a smile from. This was turning out way better than what she had planned. Okay, everyone, show's over. Let's go. Adrien's voice cut through as he made his way through the crowd, breaking the spell that everyone seemed to be under. They all started to walk away, at least not without a kind smile to Lila and glares at an accusing Marinette, though. Alya began to move away, telling Lila that she hadn't done anything and not to blame herself for her outburst. Why can't you just be nice back? Alya said, looking disappointed before walking away. I'm not civil with liars. Sorry, Marinette said hotly, sounding not sorry at all. Adrien tugged at Marinette's arm, mouthing to her, Let's go. Marinette sighed but turned around to follow Adrien away from Marinette. Marinette! The brunette called. The girl turned around, looking not at all pleased. Lila looked down at her feet for a second. I don't know what I did, but I'm so sorry for making you mad, she said loudly, not meaning any of her words. Before Marinette could really process what she had said, Lila gave her another choking hug, to which even Adrien looked surprised by. Lila hissed into Marinette's ear her last dangerous words. I told you to stay away from him. Shame you couldn't follow it. Consequences are nasty things. Don't you agree?